Aretha Coleman, and I am an advisor to Culture Shift and Culture Shifting Weekend since actually it began in Silicon Valley 5 years ago. I want to thank our sponsors, SAP, RBC, Capital Markets, and Morgan Stanley for making this evening happen. Our sponsors are also our true partners. I have the pleasure, as Andrea said, of introducing our fireside chat this evening. And Daryl, whom we've already all heard from, and I'm sure he's engaged you as he engaged me and just pulled me in. But I want to give him his just due. And so I'm going to just take a minute to introduce Daryl Davis, who, as you saw, he's a musician, he's an actor, an author, and lecturer. Earned his Bachelor of Music degree from Howard University, yay, and is an accomplished blues and rock and roll, Chuck Berry, 32 years. He's a country and jazz musician as well, and actually performs and tours with his own Daryl Davis band. He's a very busy man. He's come closer in contact, as you saw, and as we will hear more about, with members of the Ku Klux Klan than most white non-members, and certainly most Blacks. He continues to do so. Making him one of the most unique race relations experts today. Over 200 Ku Klux Klan members have left and rescinded their beliefs as a result of meeting Daryl and getting to know him. He's worked with CNN, CNBC, Good Morning America, the Learning Channel, National Public Radio, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, and the Baltimore Sun. I'm sure many others. And he's been awarded for his work in race relations. So that's Daryl. And he is going to be in conversation this evening with Shelley Archambault. Shelley is a Fortune 500 board member, former CEO of Metric Stream, an advisor and author, and my friend. Shelley has a track record of accomplishments, building brands, high-performance teams, and organizations, and it goes on and on and on. She currently serves on the boards of Verizon, Nordstrom, Roper Technologies, and Okta. And she's also a strategic advisor to the Royal Bank of Canada, Capital Markets Group, and Forbes Ignite. You can find Shelley on bookshelves as the author of Unapologetically Ambitious. Take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. Give it up for Shelley Archambault and Daryl Davis.
Thank you very much, Karitha. Appreciate that warm introduction. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. It is, oh my goodness. I'm sitting here feeling like I'm sure a lot of you on this Zoom call are. We're a group of people who've actually done quite a bit. Collectively, we have a lot of power, we have a lot of impact. And I'm sitting here after watching that TED Talk thinking, so what am I doing? Oh my goodness. So the impact that you've had, it's just powerful, deep, inspiring. It's all of that, Daryl. And it's absolutely my pleasure to be moderating you this evening. Let me start before I get to our standard questions here, but let me just start with one that came to my mind as I was watching that video. How did you feel walking the bride down the aisle in that wedding?
Well, that was definitely a different experience. Thank you, Andrea, for having me, and Karitha and Andrea and Catherine for having me on the Culture Shift Lab. But, we all are human beings. We all live, we all love, well, some of us get married, etc. So I've walked brides down the aisle before. First time I ever walked a Klan bride down the aisle. And it's the first time a Black man has ever walked a Klan bride down the aisle. But you know what? We all are human beings. I have been around the world. I grew up as a child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I grew up as an American Embassy brat. I'm 62 years old currently. And so I started traveling at the age of 3 in 1961. I was born in 1958. You go to a country, you live there for 2 years, then you return home back here to the States. You're here for a few months, possibly a year, and then you get reassigned to another country for 2 years. So back and forth, back and forth. I lived 10 years in Africa. I lived in Europe. I visited many countries in between. And when you combine my travels as a child for years, along with my travels now as an adult musician performing around the world, I have now been in a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents. So I've been exposed to a multitude of different people, different cultures, different religions, different ethnicities, etc. And all of that, starting at a young age, has impacted me and shaped my perspectives on who I've become. But I can tell you something, Andrea, no matter how far, Shelley, no matter how far I have gone from my own country, whether it be it right next door or halfway around the world, no matter how different people may appear to me or how different their cultures may be, when I return home back here to the US, I conclude one thing. We all are human beings, and we all want basically the same 5 things. We want to be loved. We want to be heard. We want to be respected. We want to be treated fairly. And we want the same thing for our family as anybody wants for their family. And as long as we can understand that, we can navigate through any obstacles we may encounter in our own society or societies abroad. Because being human beings, we share those commonalities. So just like, I walked anybody else down the aisle, walking that Klansman down the aisle was no different from me. And what it did was it allowed them to see me as a human being. And that took them a long ways. As you saw, they traveled not so much in distance, but they traveled a long ways psychologically from that date almost a year prior to that wedding, where he pulled out a gun and pointed it at a Black man and fired it, to having me walk his wife down the aisle.
Well, okay, very, very good point. And I sit here and think, Daryl, that all of us watched what happened in Charlottesville.
Yes.
And yet you're the one that thought, let me pick up the phone and call. So can you give us more of the background that led you to that point where you thought that was the right next step? Because frankly, that never would have occurred to me.
Well, this is our country. This is where we live. This is the country that we claim to love. And we all consider ourselves to be patriotic. Well, what are we doing about the situation our country is in? We can sit around and talk about it all day long, and we can preach to the choir. If I sat here and told you all day long how bad racism is, what am I accomplishing? I'm preaching to the choir. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. I need to get together with someone who may possibly be my nemesis or may not have the same opinions that I have, and not get together with them for the purpose of doing combat, but for the purpose of understanding one another. Let me try to eliminate whatever fears you might have about people who look like me. Let me try to understand what it is you fear, and perhaps I can dispel those fears. But at the same time, I want you to learn something from me. I want to learn something from you. That's how we accomplish things. We can sit around and wait for bills to be passed and laws to be passed and all that, and that's all great. Laws can compel somebody's behavior. Laws can make you let me sit in front of the bus, because if you don't, you'll be arrested. Just like if there was a law that said I had to sit in the back of the bus, and if I didn't, I could be arrested. So that law got changed to where I can sit in the front of the bus. But just because the law compels you to allow me to do that, that law does not compel you to feel that I should have the right to do that. And when you feel that, hey, it's okay for this Black guy to sit in front of the bus, that's because you came to know that Black guy. You found something in common. You found a relationship with that person. And that's what we need to do. Yes, these laws are going to happen, but as you know, it takes years for laws to pass, and then for them to even once, it's like the schools became desegregated, or the law was passed rather, in 1954 with Brown versus the Board of Education. But that didn't happen just like that. All schools just didn't integrate overnight. It took years. So what are we doing in the meantime as human beings These are our fellow Americans. Let's get to know one another. That doesn't mean that we have to forgive things that people have done to us or things like that. But in the meantime, let's get to know one another and try to mitigate some of these fears and some of this ignorance.
Perhaps you can tell us, Daryl, about your first Klansman interview with Roger Kelly and your motivation, right, for doing that interview and getting really focused on the Klansman.
Sure. Well, we have to go back a little further than that first interview. What happened was this. One of those times that I came back from overseas after my dad's assignment. And understand this, when I was overseas, going to elementary school and things like that, my classrooms were filled with other kids from all over the world. My classmates were Nigerian, Japanese, French, German, Italian, Swiss, Australian, Russian. Whoever had an embassy in those countries, all of their kids went to the same school. So to me, that was the norm. If you opened the door to my classroom overseas and stuck your head in, you would say, oh, this looks like a United Nations of little kids, because that's exactly what it was. But when I would return home, back here to my own country, I would either be in all Black schools or Black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And there was not the amount of diversity in my classroom here that I had overseas. You know, normally we think, you know, we go from Black and white TV to color TV. That's, you know, an advance. Well, I was going from Technicolor to black and white, coming from overseas back home, you understand? So when I was overseas, I was literally living probably about 10 years into the future, because that diversity, that multicultural scenario had yet to come to this country. Of course, it's here now. You walk into any city classroom, you see people from all over. But in the 1960s, no, that was not happening. So I was literally living in the future. But to me, that was the norm. I was already prepared for diversity, whereby many of my peers were not. So one of these times, we had come home at the end of an assignment, 1968. I was age 10. And I was in school in Belmont, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. I was one of 2 Black children in the entire school, myself in 4th grade, and there was a little Black girl in 2nd grade. So consequently, all of my friends were like, 4th and 5th graders. And they were all, were white. Many of my guy friends from the 4th grade were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. I was new. I joined the Cub Scouts, had a good time, and we had a parade along with the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Brownies, 4-H Club, and different organizations, marching from Lexington, Massachusetts to Concord, which was right nearby. And that is the route that Paul Revere rode. So we're marching that route, celebrating the ride of Paul Revere. The streets are blocked off. All the sidewalks are lined with nothing but white people. And they're cheering us and waving flags and yelling, the British are coming, all that kind of stuff. Well, we got to one point in this march where off to my right, a small group of white people mixed in with the larger crowd. I want to say it was maybe 4 or 5 people. I remember there being 2 kids, maybe a year or 2 older than me, and a couple of adults. We're throwing things, and I was getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and small rocks and debris from the street. And me being naive and having never experienced anything like this, my first thought was, oh, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. I didn't realize that I was the only Scout getting hit until my troop leaders all came running and covered me with their bodies and escorted me out of this danger. And I kept saying, why are they hitting me? I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. Why are they hitting me? And all they would do is shush me and rush me along, telling me everything would be okay. So they never answered my question. When I got home, my mother and father, who were not in attendance at the march, were asking me how did I fall down and get all scraped up as they're putting Band-Aids and cleaning me up. And I told them I did not fall down. I told them what had happened. And for the first time in my life, my parents sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, believe it or not, Shelley, at the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. Why would I? I've been with people all over the world, and they treated me just like I was one of them. You know, we didn't know anything about race. So when they were telling me this, my 10-year-old brain could not process it because my friends at school, my friends overseas, many of them looked just like the people who were doing this to me. So it couldn't be the color of my skin because people who looked like them were my friends. So for whatever reason, my parents were not telling me the truth. I didn't know why they were lying, but they were lying to me. And I didn't believe them. Well, within 2 months, that same year, 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And every major city in our country, Boston, nearby to Belmont, my hometown, Chicago, Illinois, near where I am right now, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Nashville, all these cities burned to the ground in the name of this new word that I had learned, racism. So now I understood this phenomenon does exist, but I didn't know why. Why does it exist? So I formed a question in my mind at that age, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for the answer to that question for 52 years. So skipping ahead, right? Graduate high school, graduate college. I'm a professional musician. So I was playing in a country western band one night, and in a place called the Silver Dollar Lounge in Frederick, Maryland. And it was known to be an all-white lounge. Not that Black people could not go in, but by choice, we did not go in because we were not welcome there. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it does not make for a good combination. So here I was in this Silver Dollar Lounge. I'm the only Black guy in the band and the only Black guy in the lounge. Now the band had been around for a while. They were an established country band in the area. So they played there before, my first time in there. I came off the bandstand on break after the first set, and I was walking to go sit down with the bandmates. And a white gentleman came up to me and put his arm around my shoulder and said how much he enjoyed the music. And then he said, you know, this is the first time I ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, I was not offended by that, but I was rather surprised that this guy who was maybe 15 or 18 years older than me did not know the Black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style of piano playing. And I said to him, well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play? He says, what are you talking about? I said, he got that style from Black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll, rockabilly style comes from. Oh, no. I never heard no Black man play like that. So for you, Jerry Lee invented that. I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. He's told me himself. The guy didn't believe that either. But he was fascinated enough with me that he wanted me to come back to his table and buy me a drink. So I went back to his table. I asked for cranberry juice. He paid for it. He took his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And then he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a Black man. Now I'm like totally mystified. How is this? Because at that point in my life, I had sat down with thousands, literally thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. How is it that this guy had never done this before? So I asked him innocently, I said, why? Well, it turns out after I had to ask him a couple of times and his buddy nudged him and said, tell him. He says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing because I thought the guy was joking. You know, I know a lot about the Klan and they don't just come up and hug you and want to buy you a drink and hang out. So this guy's pulling my leg, I'm laughing. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, flips through and hands me his Klan membership card. I look at this thing, ooh, I recognize the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. This thing is for real. So I stopped laughing and I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan and some other things. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to return back to this club with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning his Klansmen and Klanswomen friends, to see this Black guy who plays piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. So I'd call him every 6 weeks and he would, you know, show up with his friends and I would meet some of them. Some of them, you know, did not want to meet me. They see me coming and they'd get up and leave the table and scurry across the room. And so I would just meet the ones, you know, that were hanging there. And this went on for a while. And then I quit that band and I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else was going on. And it dawned on me some time later, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10 fell right into your lap. Who better to ask that question of, how can you hate me, than to ask it of someone who would go so far as to join an organization that's been around practicing hating people for over 100 years, who don't look like them and who do not believe as they believe. Get a hold of that guy. Get him to fix you up and introduce you to the state leader, which is known as a Grand Dragon, and the Imperial Wizard, which is known as the National Leader, and different Klan members, and interview them. Find out. They can tell you why they hate you. And then travel up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview other ones, because no book had been written about the Ku Klux Klan by a Black author from the perspective of sitting down face to face, interviewing them. So mine would become the first. And that's how I was led to Roger Kelly.
Wow. You know, the question, how can you hate me when you don't know me? I know I can remember exactly the time when I first thought that as a kid. I'm sure there are many people on this Zoom call who have absolutely asked themselves the same questions as they had different experiences. But one of the things that you talk about in your story is the listening piece. Can you talk to us about, how do you listen, really listen, without letting the emotion get in the way? Because I think that's what prevents a lot of us.
Absolutely. Excellent question. Okay. So my secretary set up the interview with Roger Kelly. And I told her specifically, call this guy. I got his number and stuff. And this guy gave it to me on the condition that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I received it. And he tried to warn me. He said, Daryl, do not fool with him. He will kill you. He was very concerned for my safety. He did not want to personally introduce me to Mr. Kelly because he was concerned for his own safety, for bringing a Black guy to this guy. So I said, I will handle it. I won't let him know, where I got the information. So I told her to call the guy and do not tell him that I'm Black. Just tell him, your boss is writing a book on the Klan, and would he consent to sitting down? I told her if he asked what color I was, don't lie to him, but don't allude to it. She said, okay. Because I figured if he knew what color I was, he wouldn't give me the interview and he would hang up. And my project would have ended before it ever got started. But also, if he knew what color I was and he agreed to meet with me, in the interim, he might prepare different answers for a Black interviewer than he would have for a white interviewer asking the same questions. So I wanted it to be spontaneous. She understood. She called him. He agreed to do it. So we set it up for this motel room. In fact, the motel was the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge, which was in the basement of that motel. And Mary and I got a room there several hours ahead of the interview. And, he didn't know, he'd never seen us, anything like that. So I sent Mary down the hall to get some soda pop out of the machine, put it in the ice bucket, put some ice in there, get it all cold. So I'd be able to offer my guest, a cold beverage. I want to be hospitable. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me. Would he freak out and attack me? Would he say, I'm not talking to you, and walk away? Or would he come in the room? So in any event, I want to be prepared to offer some hospitality. So she got all that set up. Well, right on time, there was a knock on the door, and Mary got up and went to answer the door. I'm seated at this little table. I had a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, a chair on the other side for myself. And beside my chair on the floor, I had a black canvas bag in which I'd taken out a cassette recorder and set it in the middle of the table to record our interview. And I had some blank cassettes in there. And I also had a copy of the Bible, because the Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. So I want to be able to, pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says Blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all set. Well, she opens the door and in walks the Nighthawk. Nighthawk in Klan terminology means bodyguard, security. He's dressed in military camouflage with that same Ku Klux Klan insignia on this side, the initials KKK on this side, and embroidered on his cap it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And he had a semi-automatic handgun in a holster on his hip. He comes in, and Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. And when the Nighthawk turned the corner and saw me, he just froze in his tracks. And Mr. Kelly did not realize that his bodyguard had stopped short, and he slammed into his back and knocked him forward. So now they both are like stumbling around, trying to regain their balance. And I'm just sitting there, looking at them, but I can read their faces. Their faces were saying, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Or is this an ambush? Or what's going on here? Right? Because I was not what they expected. And so I saw the apprehension. I stood up and I displayed my hands to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward. I put my right hand out. I said, hi, Mr. Kelly. I said, I'm Daryl Davis. And he shook my hand. So far, so good. The Nighthawk shook my hand. I said, come on in. They came in. Mr. Kelly sat down. Nighthawk stood at his right. I showed him my ID, all that. And then I sat down. And, we started talking. Now, I asked the question, why do you hate Black people? How can you hate me? All you see is my skin color. He tells me that Black people are prone to crime. We're basically criminals, and that is evidenced by the fact that there are more Black people in prison than white people. So I'm sitting 2 feet from him, listening to this. And what he said was true. There are more Black people in prison than there are white people, but it's a half-truth because he's not considering the imbalance of our judicial system that puts Black people in prison and lets white people go home for the same or similar crimes. Then he goes on to tell me that Black people are inherently lazy. We do not want to work. We want to scam the government welfare system. We want all the free handouts we can get. So I'm sitting here listening to all this. And then he says that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. So the larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence. So now I've been told I'm a criminal. I've been told that I'm lazy, and I'm told that I'm unintelligent. So is what he is saying offensive? Yes, absolutely, it is offensive. Am I offended? Absolutely not. And that's the difference. Why am I not offended? Most people would get offended and they would push back, and maybe even a fight might ensue or whatever, but the conversation would cease. It would be shut down at that point, and nothing productive would come out of that. All right. When this man, well, let me first tell you, why was I not offended? Because the man was telling a lie. He was telling an untruth. All he saw was my skin color, and he makes these characterizations and assumptions about me. Why should I be offended by something that's not true? I know who I am. This man just met me 5 or 10 minutes ago. How can he make these assertions about me? If my mother or father were to tell me that I was criminally minded, or that I'm lazy, or that I'm not too smart, I might possibly believe them because they brought me into this world. They raised me. But somebody who just met me coming through the door 5, 10 minutes ago, no, I'm not going to believe that. So I keep my emotions in check because I know who I am. Now, see, when he first comes in that door and he sees me, his wall goes up because I'm his nemesis. I'm a Black guy. He's the head of the Klan. So that wall is up. The idea, when you want to communicate with somebody, especially an adversary, you want to plant a seed. And you cannot plant a seed when somebody's wall is up. The seed will hit the wall and bounce back on your side. You want to bring the wall down. So by sitting there and listening to him, giving him the respect of allowing him to say what he wants to say. Understand, I did not respect what he was saying, but I respected his right to say it. So as I told you, people want to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to be heard, they want to be treated fairly, and they want the same things for their family as you want for yours. So I showed him that respect. I allowed him to be heard. That threw him off his game, because most people that he would talk to and say that stuff to would be offensive, and they would react, they'd push back. And that's what he's accustomed to. So I'm not pushing back. I'm letting him have his piece. That wall starts coming down. And when he gets done, the wall is down. Now he feels compelled to reciprocate. I've listened to him. I let him be heard. I respected that. Now he's going to give me my opportunity to present my platform. So now I'm going to speak. I could go on the attack, and I would be right to do that. But instead of attacking him or going on the offense by saying, you know what, you're the criminal. You're the one hanging black men from trees and bombing their churches and dragging them behind pickup trucks and all this other kind of stuff. That would cause the wall to go back up. So rather than go on the offense, I go on the defense. And I say, listen, I understand what you're saying, but here's the fact. I don't have a criminal record. Nobody in my family has a criminal record. I have never been on welfare. Nobody in my family is on welfare. Now, he said that the evidence for the IQ was proven by the fact that black students consistently score lower on high school SATs than white kids. Again, this is true, but it's a half-truth. Most black kids go to school in the inner cities, where the school systems are not as good as the suburbs. Black kids who go to school out in the suburbs and the better schools, they score a lot higher, as high as anybody else, if not higher. And also white kids who go to school in the inner cities also score very low. So he's not considering that. He just sees the net result. So I said, you know, I've never been on welfare, and nobody's ever in my family's been on welfare. I said, as far as the SATs go, my SAT scores got me into college. I have a bachelor's degree. Both my parents have master's degrees. My father was working on a PhD. Now, I'm saying all this knowing that this man barely made it out of high school. I probably have more intelligence in my little finger than he does and his whole clan put together. But I'm not going to throw that in his face, because that's going to cause the wall to go back up. So I just talk about myself. And that way the wall is down, he's hearing me. And that way the seed is being planted. Because when the wall is up, the ears are like this. So I can tell you this for a fact. Here's what happens. I've been doing this now for 36 years. And when they finally give up sometime within a few months, a couple years, whatever, this is what they tell me. They go home and they contemplate the conversation that they had. They've never had a 3-hour conversation with a black man without some kind of contention going on, right? And they think, you know, what he said about such and such, that makes sense. Oh, but he's black. But what he said was true, but he's black. So they're having a cognitive dissonance where they know that what I said was true. Either they researched it or they know it to be true, but they don't want to accept the fact that the truth came from a black source. It just was not congruent for them. And so they had this dilemma. Do I disregard his skin color and believe the truth because it is true and change my direction? Or do I consider his skin color and go on living a lie that I know is a lie? So hopefully they go in the direction that they change. And that is what has affected people like that to change and give me their Klan robes and hoods. I have a whole collection of Klan robes and hoods from these people who have renounced that ideology since coming to know me. But make no mistake about it, not everybody is going to change. There will be those who will go to their grave being hateful, racist, and violent on all sides. And there's simply no changing them. But if they are willing to take an opportunity to sit down and have that conversation, there is the potential to plant a seed. But once you plant the seed, it's not over. You need to come back time and time again and water that seed.
Wow, powerful. And it sounds so straightforward and absolutely makes sense, but it's still not easy to do. I have a tough times doing it with people who just have different political views. Forget the
well, you know, if I can go to somebody that extreme,
yes,
who hates me for no other reason than my skin color, I don't understand why people cannot sit at their dinner table with their own family who may have voted for one person and they voted for somebody else and have a family brawl about it. No, we can sit down and communicate, but we have to learn how to communicate. We stop talking about the other person, stop talking at the other person, stop talking past the other person and start talking with the other person. But a key component is listening. Even if you disagree with that person, you know who you are. Let them get it out, because everybody wants to be heard, and there's no reason for them to listen to you if you're going to shut them down and not listen to them. That is key.
Absolutely. And point well taken. Huge. If we walk away with nothing else from this conversation, I think this has been the most powerful, right, aspect, at least I know for me personally. But let's continue on this theme of listening here. And by the way, folks, about 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So please be thinking of your questions. Andrea will moderate the Q&A. Speaking of listening, let's talk about words, right? And what words actually mean. So you think about words like white privilege, white entitlement, white supremacy, right, et cetera. Can you talk about how you define these words and how you see them from a view standpoint, given all that's currently going on?
Well, a lot of it falls under the umbrella of white supremacy. Okay. In the beginning, the Klan is the oldest and at one time the largest racist gang, if you will, in this country. It was up to 4 million members in the 1920s.
Wow.
Okay, yeah.
No idea.
And probably about 1 million of them alone in the state of Indiana. It was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865 and chartered in 1866. And then it spread out. And then it became so violent that Congress passed what was known as the Ku Klux Klan Acts of 1871 that drove them underground. And then they were reborn in 1915 with the movie Birth of a Nation. And that's when it really exploded into 4 million members in the 1920s, and then started declining in the late 30s, and then on through the 60s and 70s. But the ideology was called white supremacy because people believed themselves to be supreme. And with white supremacy came a lot of violence, lynchings, church bombings, synagogue bombings, murders, all that kind of thing. And so it carried a lot of baggage with it, where there were white people who became members, but they did not want to engage in murders and terrorist kind of activity. So they began dropping out. And so membership went down. So they had to rebrand. So because the term white supremacy or I'm a white supremacist was not palatable. So then they changed the term to white separatist. I believe in white separatism. I don't hate Black people. I don't hate Jewish people. I just love my own race. Blacks should have their own schools, their own workplaces, their own parks, their own swimming pools, and so should Jews, and we should have our own. That way we don't have to mix. Oh, I like that idea. Sign me up. I'm a white separatist. So then membership began increasing again, right? And the more people you get going on, then the violence starts creeping in and became very violent again. And so then people started dropping off again. Membership decreased. So now white supremacy and white separatism becomes unpalatable. So now they got to rebrand. And this time they rebrand, I'm a white nationalist. I believe in white nationalism. Listen, we all are nationalists. We all love our country, but why do you have to say white nationalist or Black nationalist? Why can't we just be a nationalist, right? But when you put the color of your skin in front of it, it says something a little different. All right. So I'm a nationalist. I love my country, and I'm also white. So I'm a white nationalist, right? Yeah, sign me up. Membership increases. Here comes the violence. It starts decreasing again. So now the latest term is the alt-right. I'm not just right-wing, I'm alt-right, So it keeps rebranding. But as the old cliche goes, a rose by any other name is what? Still a rose. So you can call it whatever you want to call it. Now, white privilege, I differentiate that a little bit between white privilege and white entitlement. A lot of white people they all have white privilege. They all are allowed certain things that just come naturally to them that they get, and they don't even know they're getting it simply because of their white skin, whether it's jobs, whether it's, getting to do this, getting to do that, et cetera. That's white privilege. things that I could not get or that I have to fight for. Just like white people had the right to vote. They didn't have to march to get the right to vote unless they, they were women or something like that. Black women, white women, women had to march to get the right to vote. But white men never had to march for the right to vote. That's white privilege, right? So people are oftentimes take it for granted and don't even, if they have it, and some don't even realize they have it. But white entitlement is something a little different. It's white privilege and demanding to have it. I should have that job because I am white. I should be the president because I'm white and not a woman, not a black, not a Jew, not a Muslim. I'm white, therefore I should be at the top, of the company, president of the company, or whatever role that they want to have. They feel entitled. So that's a little different, and both of these things need to be addressed.
Absolutely right. And I know we're right at time. I had one more that I wanted to ask Andrew. I'm going to sneak in one more before I pass the baton here. And that just to set us up for where we are today, right? So we are really in a unique moment right now in that there is more discussion, focus on the Black community than has been the case in a very long time. My question is, are you hopeful?
Yes.
And from perspective, what are the key hurdles to us really making progress right now?
I think that people would disagree with me, and that's fine. I think we are at one of the best places in our history ever right now. Right now, despite all that's going on with the confrontations in the streets and the coronavirus and all that, we are turning a page in the history of our country right now. And it's been a long time since we turned a page. We turned pages with Rosa Parks. We turned pages with Dr. King. We turned pages with Barack Obama being elected to become the first Black president. And we turned some other pages too. But right now we are turning another page in the wake of George Floyd. And George Floyd was not an anomaly. There have been hundreds of George Floyds. But this George Floyd was the straw that broke the camel's back. And what we're seeing today is something that we've never seen before. Let me put it this way. Barack Obama, for example, Barack Obama was not put in the White House by Black people. Barack Obama was put in the White House by white people. We, Black people, only make up 12% of this country's population. And not all 12% of us can vote, either because we're not registered or we're not old enough or for whatever other reason, maybe felons or whatever. Not all 12% can vote, all right? We needed a large percentage of white people to join us in putting Barack Obama in the White House. 20 years ago, Barack Obama never could have won the White House, not because of his policies, but because the attitudes of the majority in this country were not at a point yet where they were willing to take a chance on voting for a Black man to be president. And by 2008, there were enough white people whose attitudes were, hey, you know what? I like that guy's policies. He has my vote, checked. And that's what put him in the White House. That collective voice, Blacks and whites working together, got him in. All right, now, there have always been white people who have joined us in our civil rights, starting in 1955 with Rosa Parks and on through the 1960s with Dr. King. But never before have we seen this many white people out there marching with us. Again, that collective voice, that's what does it, okay? Because in the past, we were marching for the same thing for a long time, before Rodney King, before Dr. King, Martin Luther King. We've been marching for the same thing, saying, hey, we want to be treated equally. Enough is enough. No justice, no peace. But guess what? The powers that be, the white establishment, they would see a big sea of Black people, and they were like this. They did not want to hear what we had to say, and they shut us down. Today, the powers that be are looking at our marches, and they're seeing more and more people who look like them. And therefore, they are pulling out their earplugs or else putting in their hearing aids, and they're listening They're listening, and now things are happening a lot quicker. Never before have we seen police officers, if they get charged and fired, happen that quickly. It takes months and months. And not only that, we are seeing a bigger ripple effect than we have ever seen in the history of this country. While these protests were initially geared towards police conduct in the wake of George Floyd, the ripple effect that we're seeing is NASCAR banning the Confederate flag, county legislators putting in orders to take down Confederate statues, the state of Mississippi, of all places, removing the Confederate symbol out of their flag, food brands changing their images, Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben. That is a ripple effect. And what is causing that is that collective voice. And that's what we need to look at. That same collective voice that put Barack Obama in office is the same collective voice that is causing all these changes. And that's what we need to build. We need to focus on working together for the common goal and being the United States of America, not the Confederate States of America.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Thank you very much for letting me moderate. Andrea, over to you.
We're going to do a quick Q&A, Daryl. We have 10 minutes left, and for everybody, if you want to stay on afterwards to network and share what you're doing and see where we can collaborate and get some deals done, please feel free to do that. We'll leave it open, and I'll stay on as well. But if we can do a quick sort of rapid fire answering these questions, there's 4 of them so far, maybe 5. I want to ask a quick one, and then I'm going to go to the first one here from the crowd. Daryl, why do you do this? Do you have so much love in your heart that it's just overflowing and you've got to give it away, or why do you do this work? What is the thing? In one word or a short sentence, what is it?
One short sentence, my parents fought for me because they had to drink from separate water fountains and ride in the back of the bus, but they fought so I wouldn't have to. Isn't it only fair that I do the same thing for future generations?
Well, that makes me want to cry, so I need a fan. Thank you. First question from Mariah. How did you learn the skill of listening and communicating persuasively on contentious issues?
I think just vicariously growing up in a diplomatic family where my father's job with the embassy was to foster better relations with foreign countries with our own U.S. country. And so he did a lot of listening and then talking. And so that's how I got that, I believe.
Okay. Next question from Christine Lawton. Let's see. Given the power of listening to show respect to the speaker, what value or risk do you think there is to Biden and/or Harris putting themselves in venues in which they listen to Trump supporters?
I think there's a lot of value to it, because in order to address whatever issues they believe Trump supporters to have, they have to know what they are coming from the source. You can't just speculate on that. You have to hear what they have to say and then address those particular concerns.
Thank you. This is for both Daryl and Shelley. Based on your international travels and the business climate, what is needed to affect corporate change for true equality in America?
Shelley, I'll let you take that one.
My opinion, it's leadership and courage. We don't have enough courage at the top for people to actually do what is right and what many know is right, for fear of, and then fill in the blank in terms of what they're afraid of. But I think we need more courage. And that's both a CEO as well as a board director statement, because there are people that are doing the right thing. There just aren't enough of them. And we need to apply pressure.
And I would agree with Shelley. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about that cognitive dissonance, where you know somebody's right, but you're considering the color of their skin. You know, these people, these corporate leaders, they know the difference between right and wrong, but they got something else. You know, either they're going to lose employees, lose respect, lose whatever for following the right path. So therefore, they continue down the wrong path. We need that moral courage and leadership.
Next question, I believe this is from Anthony Jr. How do you view the effectiveness of the Black Lives Matter movement without the riotous elements? Is this approach effective? How do you think Black Lives Matter could be more effective? Daryl?
Yes, I think Black Lives Matter could be a lot more effective than it is. I don't support the decentralization of it because the founders had a great idea in creating it, but they did not want it centralized. And I think as a result, it's done more damage to itself because there's so many different chapters all over the place, and they're not all on the same page. There are chapters that contact me saying, "Hey, do you give workshops? Can you teach us how to do what you do?" And then there are other chapters that just rip me a new one because they don't believe in what I'm doing. I'm sitting down with the enemy. I'm a race traitor. I'm an Uncle Tom. I'm an Oreo. I'm this, that, and the other. I've been called every name but my own, which is fine by me because I know who I am. But we need more cohesiveness, and being together. Unity is what makes the strength, not being divided amongst yourselves.
Thank you for that. Another question. Let's see. Have you ever encountered Klansmen who you have not been able to convert, and are there any characteristics that were common to those people who were unable to evolve?
Yes, of course. And I don't like to say that I converted them. I prefer to say that I was the impetus for them to convert themselves. I just give them food for thought and let them do the conversion. Of course, there are people on all sides, as I said earlier, who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. And that's the difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance can be cured. An ignorant person is someone who makes a wrong decision or a bad choice because he or she does not have the facts. And so when you cure that ignorance by giving them the facts and the right information, they can make the right choice or correct decision. A stupid person is someone who has the facts and still makes the wrong decision. So fortunately, we can cure ignorance. Unfortunately, we cannot cure stupidity. So there's a difference.
That is the quote of the evening. Whoever wants to tweet that out, please do. #MakeShiftHappen. What would be your question for Donald Trump?
What would be my question for Donald Trump? I have a lot of questions for Donald Trump. I played for him back around 1999, 2000, long before he ever got into politics. But I guess my question for him would be, what don't I have to lose? Because when he was running for office and campaigning, he met with a black group, and his question to us was, vote for him. What do we have to lose? He said, what do you all have to lose? So at this point now, 4 years later, I'm asking him, what don't I have to lose? What does this country not have to lose? Not just me.
Well, listen, we are living through unprecedented times in so many levels, and go ahead, Daryl.
But I will say this, personally, I did not support him as president. But I do think that he is the best thing that has happened to this country, not through anything that he designed himself, but just through his behavior. As a result of him, we've got the Me Too movement, which we need. We need more women to come forward and talk about sexual harassment and things like that, and abuse. We're having more conversations on race today than we've ever had. And these are things that were taboo before. People did not want to talk about abuse of women or racial issues. And now we're being confronted with them in our face, and we have to do it. And that's the only way things are going to change. And he did not invent it by any means. I'm not blaming it on him, but he certainly fanned the flames and certainly stirred the pot on all of those things that are making us get out of our comfort zone and pull the rug back, open the closet door, and address these issues, which is what we all need to do. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. So thank you to him for making us address these issues.
Well, before I pass it on to Gordy Davidson, I want to just say, thank you to your parents for bringing you into this world. And you're just, a hero and somebody that, we now consider you part of our culture shifting community, which is all about abundance and generosity, abundance mindset and generosity behavior. And I think we've all, I see everybody nodding their head. We can all just, I think what I've seen through these virtual events that we have, and and other work that we're doing is there are people that are making public statements about racial equality and their commitments to it and their financial commitments and their 5 and 10-point plans as companies. But there are a lot of companies and individuals and leaders that are making private commitments and still doing the work. And so just on behalf of the Culture Shift Labs company and on behalf of our culture shifting community of culture shifters, I know that we're all going to enable each other's success and wealth creation, and we're committed to doubling down and doing that work. And so I think tonight was tonight was an absolute inspiration. My partner Denmark may want to say a few words behind Gordy, who will give some closing remarks. But Denmark, if there's something you'd like to say, please let's have Gordy close us out. But happy to have you say a few words as well. And let's stay on for a little bit of networking. So on to you, Gordy.
Thank you, Andrea. And Daryl, thank you.
Thank you.
While you were speaking, I was monitoring the chats, and I'll tell you the 3 most common words were powerful, patient, and inspiring. And I wrote down 2 more of my own, which were pure and profound. Thank you. Thank you for helping us all to learn and better understand each other. This has really been an important conversation, a powerful one, a patient one, and an inspiring one. And this is the time, as you said. So thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
And Andrea, thank you to SAP and RBC Capital Markets sponsors, and to our title sponsor, Morgan Stanley, for making this possible. And finally, thank you to everybody who came.
Yes.
This is just a remarkable and memorable evening.